The day everything shattered, some endings arrive quietly like whispers in the dark. Others crash into your life with the force of a thunderstorm, leaving nothing but wreckage in their wake. For Olivia Carter, her ending came on a gray Tuesday afternoon in a lawyer's office that smelled of old books and broken promises. The rain hammered against the windows as if the sky itself was weeping for what was about to be lost. Olivia sat across from the man she had pledged her life to 5 years earlier, yet Julian Pierce felt like a stranger now. His jawline was as sharp as ever, his expensive suit perfectly tailored, but his eyes refused to meet hers. Those same eyes that once looked at her like she was his entire world now stared at the divorce papers as if they were just another business contract requiring his signature. Her hands trembled as she reached for the pen. This simple act would erase years of laughter, countless whispered promises and dreams they had built together in the quiet hours of the night. The silence in that room was suffocating, broken only by the relentless ticking of an old grandfather clock and the scratching of pen against paper. Each letter of her name felt heavier than the last, as if her signature carried the weight of every memory they had created together. Julian signed without hesitation, his movements efficient and detached. When he stood to leave, Olivia wanted to scream. She wanted to grab his arm and beg him to remember who they used to be. She wanted to ask when he had stopped loving her, when his business empire had become more important than the life they were supposed to build together, but pride kept her frozen, just as it had kept both of them from truly communicating for months. The door closed behind him with a soft click that echoed like the final note of a sad song. Olivia sat motionless for several minutes, staring at the empty chair across from her. The receptionist offered a sympathetic smile that felt like pity, and Olivia quickly gathered her things and rushed to the bathroom. She locked herself in a stall as tears finally broke free, her body shaking with silent sobs. It was then that she remembered the test hidden in her purse. The pregnancy test she had taken that very morning, still wrapped in tissue paper, carrying a secret that changed everything. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out and stared at the 2 pink lines that had appeared hours earlier. 2 lines that represented new life, new hope, new complications. 2 lines that came too late to save what had already been destroyed. She pressed her hand against her still flat stomach, feeling nothing yet but knowing that a tiny miracle was growing there. A piece of Julian that she would carry forever even as he walked away from her life. The cruelty of timing nearly broke her. They had spent 2 years trying for a baby, filling out adoption papers, visiting fertility specialists, tracking ovulation dates, and praying for the miracle that never came. Now, when their marriage lay in ruins and Julian had made it clear through months of absence that she no longer mattered to him, nature had decided to answer their prayers, but she could not tell him. Not now. Not when his face had been so cold, so completely shut off from her. Not after months of arguments about his endless working hours, her growing loneliness, and the vast emotional distance that had opened between them like a canyon. Julian had become consumed by building his business empire, leaving Olivia to wonder if she had ever truly been more than an accessory to his ambition. She tore the pregnancy test into pieces, watching them fall into the trash like the fragments of her marriage. This baby would be hers alone. She would protect this child from the pain of feeling unwanted, from growing up in a home filled with resentment and cold silences. Her child would never watch their father choose work over family, would never feel the crushing weight of not being enough. That night, Olivia packed her belongings from the luxury apartment they had shared. Each item she placed in boxes felt like saying goodbye to a version of herself that no longer existed. She found their wedding album tucked away in a drawer and allowed herself one painful moment to flip through the pages. There they were, younger and radiating hope, dancing under string lights, kissing in the rain, laughing like they owned the world and nothing could ever tear them apart. She closed the album and left it on the kitchen counter. Some memories were too heavy to carry into a new life. The following months blurred together in a haze of morning sickness, doctor appointments, and the overwhelming challenge of rebuilding a life from scratch. Olivia moved to a smaller neighborhood across town, far from the luxury she had grown accustomed to. She found work as a freelance graphic designer, taking on projects from her laptop while her belly grew round with life. Her best friend Rebecca became her anchor, attending every ultrasound appointment and holding her hand through moments of doubt and fear. When Emma finally arrived on a snowy December night, Olivia held her daughter and knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. This tiny, perfect being with her father's striking green eyes and her mother's determined spirit would grow up surrounded by love. She would never know the pain of watching her parents destroy each other with words left unsaid and dreams abandoned. Building a new world. 6 years passed like chapters in a book written with patience and love. Olivia built a life that was simple but rich in the ways that truly mattered. Their small house had a backyard garden, where Emma spent hours chasing butterflies and creating elaborate fairy kingdoms from sticks and flowers. The walls were covered with Emma's colorful drawings, each one a testament to her wild imagination and joyful spirit. Olivia worked from home, carefully selecting design projects that paid the bills, while allowing her to be present for every precious moment of Emma's childhood. She attended every school event, kissed every scraped knee, and answered countless questions about why the sky was blue and where stars went during the day. Their life had a rhythm that felt right, even if it sometimes felt incomplete. Emma was extraordinary. She had inherited intelligence from both parents, along with a curiosity that seemed boundless. She asked questions about everything, from the mechanics of rainbows to the mysteries of the ocean depths. She drew pictures that told elaborate stories, wrote poems about dragons and princesses, and approached life with an optimism that sometimes made Olivia's heart ache. When Emma asked about her father, which happened with increasing frequency as she grew older, Olivia gave carefully crafted answers that were technically true but incomplete. He lives far away. He works very hard. Maybe someday you will meet him. The lies tasted bitter every time, but they seemed kinder than the complicated truth. Meanwhile, across the city, Julian Pierce had achieved everything society told him should matter. His company had grown from a modest startup into a major force in commercial real estate. His name appeared in business magazines, his opinions were sought by reporters, and his wealth had grown beyond what he had ever imagined. He lived in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city, surrounded by expensive artwork and designer furniture that impressed visitors but felt cold and empty when he was alone. Success, he discovered, tasted hollow without someone to share it with. At night, when the business calls ended and the meetings concluded and the city lights sparkled below, Julian found himself thinking about Olivia. He wondered where she was, whether she had found happiness, whether she ever thought about the life they had almost built together. He dated occasionally, meeting elegant women who understood his demanding lifestyle and did not ask for more than he could give. But none of them made him feel the way Olivia once had. None of them challenged him, laughed at his terrible jokes, or saw past the successful businessman to the uncertain man underneath. He had built an empire but lost his kingdom in the process. The realization came slowly, accumulating weight over years until it became impossible to ignore. The turning point arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Julian was scheduled to meet potential investors at a coffee shop in a neighborhood he rarely visited. His driver took an unfamiliar route to avoid traffic, and they ended up parking near an elementary school just as classes were letting out. Julian was reviewing documents in the back seat when something made him glance up. Children poured from the building in a joyful chaos of backpacks and laughter. And there, holding the hand of a small girl with dark curls, was Olivia. Time seemed to stop. 6 years had passed, but Julian would have recognized her anywhere. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, and she looked more beautiful than he remembered. But it was the child beside her that made his breath catch in his throat. The little girl looked up at Olivia with pure adoration, chattering animatedly about something that made her mother laugh. The sound of that laughter, so familiar yet so distant, struck Julian like a physical blow. He watched, transfixed, as they walked toward a modest car parked on the street. Olivia carefully buckled the child into a booster seat and pressed a kiss to her forehead with such tenderness that Julian felt something crack open inside his chest. He should have looked away. He should have instructed his driver to continue to the meeting. But something compelled him to follow as Olivia's car pulled away from the school. They drove through winding streets to a neighborhood of small houses with neat yards and children's toys scattered on lawns. When Olivia parked in front of a blue house with flower boxes in the windows, Julian had his driver stop several houses away. He watched as the little girl bounced from the car with limitless energy, racing up the front path. Olivia followed more slowly, calling out something that made the child pause and wait. They disappeared inside together, the door closing on a life that Julian suddenly, desperately wanted to understand. He sat in his car for a long time, watching that blue house with its cheerful flower boxes, feeling something shift fundamentally inside him. For 3 days, Julian could not stop thinking about what he had seen. The image of Olivia and that child haunted him during meetings, kept him awake at night, and made him question everything he thought he knew about his life. Finally, he hired a private investigator, telling himself he just needed to know if Olivia was okay, if she was happy, if she needed anything. The report arrived within 48 hours, and the words on the page changed everything. Olivia Carter, age 32, freelance graphic designer, lived alone with her 6-year-old daughter, Emma. 6 years old. Julian did the math in his head, counting back to when they had signed those divorce papers. The timeline was impossible to ignore, undeniable in its implications. Emma had been born roughly 8 months after their separation, which meant Olivia had been pregnant when she signed those papers. When she watched him walk away without saying a word, when she let him believe it was truly over between them. The truth comes home. The realization crashed over Julian like a tidal wave, drowning him in emotions he could barely name. He had a daughter, a child who had existed for 6 years without him knowing. 6 years of birthdays, first steps, first words, first days of school, all stolen from him. The anger that surged through him was hot and immediate, a burning fury at the injustice of it all. But beneath the anger lived something deeper and more painful, grief for everything he had missed, and a desperate, aching need to know this child who carried his blood. Julian sat alone in his penthouse that night, staring at the city lights that had once represented success and now felt like a monument to everything he had sacrificed for the wrong reasons. Somewhere in that blue house with flower boxes, his daughter was probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that her entire world was about to change. He had built an empire of glass and steel, but he had failed at the only thing that truly mattered. He had let Olivia go. He had let his pride and ambition destroy the best relationship he had ever had. And now, impossibly, he had a chance to make things right. The next morning, Julian drove to that blue house with his heart pounding like a drum. The sun cast long shadows across Olivia's small kitchen as she prepared breakfast for Emma. Her daughter sat at the table, coloring a picture of what she claimed was a dragon princess riding a rainbow, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. When the doorbell rang sharp and unexpected, Olivia glanced at the clock in confusion. It was barely 8 in the morning, far too early for visitors. She opened the door and found Julian standing on her doorstep. He looked exactly as she remembered, yet somehow completely different. His hair was shorter now, touched with distinguished gray at the temples. Lines around his eyes suggested sleepless nights and heavy burdens. He wore casual clothes instead of his usual business armor, jeans and a simple shirt that made him look more human, more vulnerable, more like the man she had once loved. The word escaped her lips as barely a whisper. For a moment, neither of them moved. 6 years of separation stretched between them like an ocean, and Olivia felt herself drowning in memories she had worked so hard to bury. Her hand gripped the doorframe so tightly her knuckles turned white. Julian's voice was rough with emotion when he finally spoke. He told her he had seen them at the school 3 days ago. He told her about the investigation, and then he asked the question that hung between them like a sword. Was Emma his daughter? The truth was impossible to deny, written in those green eyes they both shared. Olivia felt protective instinct rise in her like a tidal wave, fierce and primal. She moved to close the door, but Julian stopped her gently, not forcefully but firmly enough that she understood he would not simply walk away this time. From the kitchen, Emma's voice called out with innocent curiosity, asking who was at the door. Olivia's heart seized. She looked at Julian with desperate pleading in her eyes, silently begging him not to do this here, not now, not like this. Something in her expression must have reached him because he stepped back, giving her space to breathe. They agreed to talk that evening after Emma was asleep. Olivia watched Julian walk back to his expensive car that looked so out of place on her modest street, and her hands were shaking as she closed the door and returned to the kitchen, forcing a bright smile for Emma that felt like a mask. That evening, after Emma was tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed rabbit, they sat in Olivia's small living room. Two people who had once known each other intimately now faced each other as strangers navigating dangerous territory. Julian asked for everything, and Olivia gave it to him. She told him about discovering the pregnancy on the day of their divorce, about the test torn into pieces in the lawyer's bathroom, about the decision she made in that moment of pain and fear. She explained how she had convinced herself that keeping Emma a secret was protecting her daughter from a father who had seemed so distant, so consumed by building his empire that there was no room for anything else. The words poured out of her like a confession, years of justification and guilt finally finding voice. Julian's anger was understandable and painful to witness. He told her she had no right to make that decision alone, to steal 5 years of his daughter's life from him. But Olivia's own anger rose to meet his. She reminded him how he had walked away, how he had chosen his business over their marriage, how every late night at the office and every canceled plan had shown her exactly where his priorities were. The argument laid bare old wounds that had never properly healed. Julian admitted he had failed her, that he had been so focused on building something that mattered he had not seen he was losing what mattered most. But that admission did not erase the years he had missed with Emma. They both cried that night, for different reasons and the same reason, mourning what had been lost and what might have been. Over the following weeks, they carefully constructed a bridge between Julian's world and Emma's. Olivia prepared her daughter with gentle explanations, sitting her down and telling her that her daddy was coming to meet her, that he had always loved her even though he had been away. Emma's excitement was pure and heartbreaking. She drew pictures for this father she had never met, practiced what she would say, asked endless questions with the boundless curiosity that defined her. On the day of their first meeting, Emma wore her favorite dress and stood by the window watching for Julian's car with an intensity that made Olivia's heart ache. When he arrived and knelt to Emma's level, something profound happened. This child looked at a stranger with green eyes that matched her own, and recognition flickered across her face. Not memory, but something deeper, a connection that transcended time and circumstance. Emma walked forward and wrapped her small arms around Julian's neck in a hug that conveyed forgiveness neither adult had earned and love they did not deserve. Julian held his daughter for the first time, and tears streamed down his face unchecked. Olivia turned away, giving them privacy for this moment that belonged to them alone, and found herself crying too for the years lost and the complicated, messy beauty of this new beginning. Love finds its way home. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of adjustment and discovery. Julian came every Saturday, and Olivia watched from a careful distance as he learned to be a father. He brought thoughtful gifts that showed he was paying attention, books about dinosaurs because Emma loved them, art supplies because she loved to create. A kite they flew together in the park while Emma's laughter rang out like music against the blue sky. Julian was patient with Emma's endless questions, attentive to her changing moods, gentle when she grew tired or overwhelmed. Olivia saw glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, the one who had been buried beneath ambition and pride. She saw him reading bedtime stories with different voices for each character, building elaborate block towers that Emma gleefully knocked down, listening with genuine interest as their daughter explained the complex rules of games she had invented. One evening after Emma had fallen asleep, Julian lingered at the door longer than usual. He thanked Olivia for giving him this chance, for raising Emma to be such an amazing child. Olivia admitted with surprise in her own voice that he was good with their daughter. Julian replied simply that he was trying to be the father Emma deserved, the father he should have been from the beginning. Their eyes met in that moment and something passed between them. Not forgiveness yet, but understanding, the first fragile thread of connection being rewoven after years of separation. As spring turned to summer, the boundaries between them began to blur in ways both frightening and wonderful. Julian started arriving earlier, staying for dinner, helping with homework, becoming woven into the fabric of their daily lives. Emma blossomed under the attention of both parents, her confidence growing, her happiness multiplying. One Saturday they took Emma to the zoo, and it felt startlingly normal. The three of them walking together, Emma between them holding both their hands, looked like any other family enjoying a sunny day. At the penguin exhibit, Emma demanded to be lifted for a better view. Julian hoisted her onto his shoulders while she squealed with delight, and Olivia stood beside them watching her daughter's joy, feeling Julian's presence like warmth against her skin. Emma announced from her perch that this was perfect, that they should do this every day. Julian caught Olivia's eye over their daughter's head, and the look they shared was complicated, wistful, painful, and full of possibility. That evening, after Emma was asleep, they sat on Olivia's small back porch. The summer air was warm, filled with the sound of crickets and distant traffic. Julian reached over and took Olivia's hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. He told her he had been wrong about everything that mattered. He had spent 6 years building an empire that felt empty, without the people who gave his life meaning. Olivia listened as Julian spoke about the loneliness of success, about realizing too late what he had thrown away, about seeing her with Emma and understanding what true wealth looked like. He told her he wanted a second chance, not just with Emma, but with both of them. He wanted to be the man they both deserved, the partner and father he had failed to be before. Olivia's response came slowly, carefully, because words mattered now in ways they had not before. She told him that trust, once broken, required time and patience to rebuild. She explained that Emma's heart was now involved and protecting their daughter had to come first. But she also admitted with vulnerability that cost her, that she had never stopped loving him completely, that some part of her had been waiting for him to find his way home. They began dating again, cautiously at first, like teenagers learning the steps of an unfamiliar dance. Julian courted Olivia with a patience and attention he had never shown during their marriage. He sent flowers to her office, took her to quiet restaurants where they talked for hours, wrote her letters that expressed feelings he had once kept locked away. Emma noticed the change between her parents and asked with a child's straightforward honesty if they were going to be a real family. Olivia and Julian looked at each other over their daughter's head, and in that shared glance was an entire conversation about hope and fear and the courage required to try again. 3 months later, on a warm autumn evening, Julian proposed again. Not in a fancy restaurant or with an elaborate plan, but in Olivia's backyard while Emma played with fireflies in glass jars. He told Olivia that he had been given a gift he did not deserve, a second chance to get it right. He promised to choose them every day, to remember what truly mattered, to be present for the small moments that built a life worth living. Olivia said yes, not because everything was perfect, but because they had both learned that love was not about perfection. It was about choosing each other repeatedly, about forgiveness and growth, about building something stronger from broken pieces. Their wedding was small and intimate, held in that same backyard where Julian had proposed. Emma served as flower girl, beaming with pride in her special dress. As Olivia and Julian exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises about presence and partnership and putting family first, Emma stood between them holding both their hands. This time, when they promised forever, they both understood what that promise required. They had learned through pain and separation that love was not enough on its own. It required attention, communication, sacrifice, and the daily choice to show up for each other even when it was difficult. Years later, when Emma was older and asked about their story, Olivia would tell her the truth. She would explain that sometimes people needed to lose everything to understand what truly mattered. She would tell her daughter that endings could become beginnings, that broken things could be mended into something even stronger, and that the greatest love stories were not the ones without struggle, but the ones where people chose to fight for each other despite the struggle. Julian added that their family was built on second chances and the belief that it was never too late to become the person you were meant to be. He told Emma that she was the greatest gift of his life, the miracle that brought him home to what mattered most. Their blue house with flower boxes grew and changed over the years. They added a porch swing where they sat together in the evenings. Emma's artwork continued to cover the walls, joined eventually by her awards and achievements. The garden expanded and they planted a tree to mark each important moment. Some nights after Emma was asleep, Julian and Olivia would sit on that porch swing and marvel at the journey that brought them here. They did not regret the pain because it had taught them wisdom. They did not erase the years of separation because those years had transformed them into people capable of truly appreciating what they had found again. Their story was not perfect, but it was real. It was messy and complicated and beautiful, built on forgiveness and growth and the stubborn belief that love, when combined with effort and presence and choice, could overcome even the deepest wounds. And in that blue house with flower boxes, a family thrived, not because they had never been broken, but because they had learned how to heal together, stronger in their brokenness than they had ever been in their certainty. This was not the ending they had planned, but it was the one they had earned through tears and time and the courage to try again. And that made it the most beautiful ending of all.